They're getting a bit trendy. Now, should the army stop using horses? Yesterday, 5 military horses broke free, running loose in central London. They were filmed running down busy streets looking distressed. One of the horses ran into a parked tour bus, injuring itself, and then was pictured covered in blood. I think that was the grey one. The Defence Minister James Cartlidge has said 2 of the horses, Vida and Quaker, are in a serious condition. 3 soldiers and a member of the public were injured. You can see the route here. The escaped horses ran from Westminster through central London all the way to Limehouse in East London. They went a long way, partly because the roads were cleared for them. The horses were from the Household Cavalry and on an exercise to keep up the fitness of the animals while they were out walking. Apparently they were spooked by the noise of builders moving concrete. So just come this way with me and we'll have a little look at the history of these horses. So this is Hyde Park. Yesterday, before the horses escaped, just by chance I was cycling past their home in Hyde Park. So take a look. Squat, secure Hyde Park barracks here. This is where a lot of the horses come out. Here it is. And I think if we just freeze it here, I mean, obviously they would normally be kept there, and just have a look at some of the history of it. So starts with Charles II, 1660. Monarchy came back and he wanted protection. He'd had his private bodyguards. They were the lifeguards. They were all, here's a fact, private gentlemen. And basically when he came back as king, he said, all right, you're now an official unit. And they were busy. I mean, you forget. So they were Jacobite wars, the Second Dutch War, the War of Austrian Succession, the Egyptian War of 1882, the relief of Khartoum, the Boer War in 1900. So they were fighting in all of them. The horses were there. You then had the First World War. They started on horseback. They then gave up the horses because they wanted to do machine guns instead. But they then came back afterwards. And during the Second World War, again, the lifeguards, as they were called, and the Royal Horse Guards were everywhere. Palestine, Italy, North Africa, etc. 1945, they came together. And the last action was 1990, the lifeguards in the Gulf War. That blows your mind, doesn't it? So since 1992, we've known them chiefly as the Household Cavalry. And they do ceremonial things. The height, the horses have to be 168 centimetres high. They usually, each horse has a specific soldier. Isn't that interesting? And every year they're given a break from their city duties and they go to Hokum in Norfolk and they do exercise. So they're very, very special and important, these horses. And it's an amazing history. We forget they were used properly in warfare for hundreds of years. But seeing them bolting in 21st century traffic, Ateh, is sad.
Heartbreaking. And, you know, I love animals, I love horses, and it was incredibly sad. I'm a Londoner, I grew up riding horses in Hyde Park, but there's so much history here. In my whole life, I've never seen anything like that. I think one incident shouldn't mean we scrap it all, even though it was heartbreaking images, personally.
Well, it's odd, isn't it? Because they are trained, they're still trained to endure gunfire, cannon, whatever. They'd have all kinds of saluting and discipline. So why concrete scraping along the ground upset them, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and it sounds like, as you just alluded to, it was a one-off event. It was builders dropping this concrete. So it sounded like it was a sound of rubble going down, which they weren't used to.
True.
And I think questions need to be asked about why that couldn't have been predicted, why when they were on this walk, and maybe that's something that needs to be looked at in the future. But it's I don't think in my entire lifetime I've ever heard of an event like this.
Or seen anything
and so
they're so disciplined.
Yeah, so I don't know why we would potentially, or why there are perhaps animal rights groups that are calling for horses to no longer be used when this is such a rare event.
Well, we'll talk to an animal rights group in just a tick, but let me just play you something from Radio 2 yesterday. So I talked to Bobby Pryor, who's our brilliant travel reporter. As it happens, she was crossing the road, the Strand, from Charing Cross Station, just crossing the road. She looks the other way and she sees the horses coming towards her. Have a listen.
I heard horse hooves and coming at speed. It's quite unusual to hear them at that speed, to be honest. And I know horses, so as I looked to the left, I saw 2 horses coming towards me. I ran just to get across the road. And in that couple of seconds you're looking and you can see two horses, empty horses, there's no riders, but they're tacked up. And I was sitting there thinking, where'd they come from? Because I know there's a riding stables in near Hyde Park, but also they're not police horses, but they're big horses, at least 16 hands. And the grey, or the white one as you would call it, had blood down it looked like from its withers, from its shoulders. And it was just coming at such a speed. I think I need to stop those horses. I need to stop those horses.
That's Bobby Pryor. Let's talk. It's incredible. So she's spent a bit of time with horses, and she had the thought, I'm going to stop them myself. And then the instinct takes over. No, you're just going to clear out the way. Because she would have ended up on her own travel bulletin if she'd brought them to a halt. I'm joined by Kate Werner from the animal rights charity PETA, which stands for People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And you think, Kate, this is it's game over for using horses in the army?
Well, I certainly think we need to re-examine the way that we are, the Ministry of Defence and the Army is using horses, because clearly they're highly sensitive. They can become spooked very easily. And, forcing them to partake in drills, whether ceremonial or for crowd control or whatever else, can upset them, as we've seen. They don't choose to be part of the military, to carry humans, to be fitted with reins and subjected to loud noises. And these images of these blood-soaked horses, running scared, is a stark reminder that they're not military equipment. So,
let me just, before you say that, but we saw some footage yesterday, I think we got still, of St. George's Day, and this parade got really nasty, right? For the poor old police are in there, and some of these yobs were trying to break through to a route that they hadn't organised. Now, you watch that crowd, it's really nasty until the mounted police arrive. And any second now, you'll see them come, and the whole thing changes. And Kate, this is why, here they come. This is why you have police on horseback, because look at those guys. They're not going to bother with them. They make it safer for the police.
But they do bother with them,
No, look at that. Look at that.
These horses horses in these situations have been punched in the face. On St. George's Day, they were hit with umbrellas at football matches. Really terrible injuries have occurred with horses. One was spooked in a crowd in Morecambe and died from severe stomach injuries. They're frightened very, very easily. And why take the risk? Why put them in central London? Why make them do these drills and these displays? You mentioned tradition, but that's not an excuse to put these horses at, risk of losing their lives. And not just horses, humans too.
Ateh, what do you think? You agree with that?
I think those horses in that completely de-escalated that situation and was really necessary. I love animals. I love horses. I was one of the kids who used to ride in Hyde Park, and that was such a magical, beautiful experience. I just think stronger measures need to happen so this never happens again. And back in the day, one of my friends went out with one of the cavalry men, and she said they had such a beautiful relationship with the horses. They are loved and well taken care of.
Yeah. Cristo? Maybe it's as you say, it happens once every 1,000 years, so you can't react to it.
Could you have imagined the Queen's funeral without horses?
Well, but can you imagine the Queen's funeral where a horse bolts?
Well, but the thing is that they are so well trained because of that special relationship, and it is part of our history, of our pageantry. No, if this was a regular occurrence, if something like this happened, regularly, I think that there would be an absolute justified debate about this. But I think that this was a really rare event. This is not something that happens often.
A freak accident.
It did happen at the King's coronation. We saw a horse, collide with the crowd. And, it does take a lot of training to desensitize horses, but this is a natural instinct, and we can never guarantee that they won't react while on duty. I think that's what we should take from this instance. It's an extreme, but it can it does happen.
Let me just take a caller if I can. Angela in Leicestershire, hi.
Hi, Jeremy.
What do you think? Are you thinking with Kate here that this is game over now?
No, I don't. I think if you're going to go that route, you then take horses out of any equation. Nobody rides them. Nobody takes them on any road ever again. They are, as your team says, very highly trained for almost anything that could happen. And this is a once in a lifetime, well, not quite my lifetime, but I remember the bombing when the horses got desperately injured with a knife.
Yeah, I remember.
And again, you think at the time, gosh, this is a one-off. This will never happen again. But horses are an integral part of so many people's lives. They are part of the tradition, and they're probably safer in London with very slow traffic, as you said about bicycling in London, than they are in the country.
Well, maybe that's right. Angela, thank you. John in Cambridgeshire, hi.
Hi, Jeremy.
Would you stop using them?
So say again.
Would you stop using them?
No, I would not stop doing. I'm ex-household. I was a corporal horse in the Household Cavalry.
Oh, okay, John.
Royals.
Yep.
I did ceremonial for 2 years. I also did armoured side. I would definitely keep the horses in London. We've seen bad things, obviously, with the IRA blowing them up in the past. And every day, an occasion like this, they're on watering order. When you go on watering an order, you don't expect concrete to be dropped or scraped anywhere with high noise levels.
Well, yeah, I mean, you do in London. You do in London. You've got stuff going on everywhere in London. I mean,
I know most of the horses, but that noise must have happened very close to where the horses were. Yeah. I mean, even sometimes you go past plastic bags with horses and they flutter a bit, but we're taught to ride things properly. Big bangs, explosion, bombs. Excuse me, horses aren't used to big bombs and big explosions.
No, fair comment, John. Thank you so much for calling. I think we'll talk a bit more about this in the next part as well, because we've got so many people wanting to get in touch with us. It might be that it's a particular... I'm wondering whether this concrete was, as you say, if it's rubble that's dropped, that's a very distinctive and troubling noise.
If I quote, it was right next to them, apparently.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, who the hell would drop a large weight next to a horse, by the way?
Yeah.
And when I ride past them on a bicycle, I go so slowly. I wouldn't even ring my bell. I don't want to cause it. Go on, Kate.
I think that's a good point. There is often building work going on in London, right? Like skyscrapers being built, things being knocked down, and that happens in big cities. But horses don't belong in these big cities where there's these noises that we can't control for. And that's a good point. We can't control for all the noises that they might be exposed to. And they're highly strung animals. Even the most well-trained horses will and can and have reacted and bolted and they could have died. And people could have died too. Humans could have died too.
Thank you very much, Kate, for joining us from the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA, 0207 862 2222. So many calls. We think we'll talk a bit more about this in the next part. But let's have some more calls, because so many people keep calling about the army horses, and particularly upsetting this morning to find out that two of them are in a rough state, I think. I don't want to say critical, but it's when they say they've been named, you think, OK, that sounds serious. Mandy in Mid Glamorgan, it's a bit heartbreaking, isn't it?
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, it was upsetting. I mean, being around horses for 50 odd years. My daughter's a rider. She's been in her 40s. She's been around horses growing up and still got horses. Basically, horses are 100% bomb-proof, no matter what you do. And if one spooks, they learn an instinct. The other will take off. And I think it's about time they rethink it. It's nice is what they looked when they laughed up and they got all the tack on. I think it's about time now, being in London, and once too often, it is upsetting to see.
I mean, it's funny that, I don't know if you saw my graphic, but that's my route into work every day, is past their barracks. I mean, it's right, it is in Hyde Park, but it is the centre of a very crowded city. There's not a lot of countryside around there, Ateh.
There's not a lot of countryside, but it's been going on since 1660.
Yes, it has.
I know it's evolved around growing cities as well. I think it's a huge part of our tradition. I don't know. I would feel very sad to see them go, but safety is important. But I think it's traditional. I like to see them there.
I think I remember seeing a history programme that said one of the problems the French basically folded in the Second World War is because they were still running mounted infantry. And it just had, that's going back there to 1940, and they said to the Mounties, go on, get out there and have at 'em, and the Germans have got planes and tanks, and that's so that's 80 years ago, any semblance of horses being used in war was gone, basically. Mandy, thanks so much. Dean in Lincolnshire, do you think we should now say, okay, we don't use them in war now, let's not use them for ceremonial either?
Yeah, of course, Jeremy. I mean, millions of horses have been lost in wars over the years, and I think it's about time to rethink our position, our attitude towards horses. They are animals that should be living in a rural environment and not an urban environment. in an urban environment, it's always busy, always lots of people about, very frantic in London. That is not a suitable environment for a horse because of their sensitive nature, their inbuilt nature, because they're prey animals. So they're always going to be spooked. And only a couple of years ago, we saw a horse killed in Hyde Park when he got his leg caught in a gun carriage. The horse had to be destroyed. We saw a horse break loose at William and Kate's funeral, with it break loose from the rider. We saw a horse with a rider break loose at the Queen's funeral. So very clear that these animals, it is actually cruel to keep them in these environments.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I mean, lots of different views. Obviously, if you're a soldier and you are lucky enough to work with this horse, the relationship, you'd never want it to end. Thank you, Dean. Thanks, everyone. It's close to our hearts, this, and we'll find out. I hope we'll find out the horses have got better. I really do hope.